The morning began with a stillness that didn't feel quite right, the kind of silence that settles before something important happens, whether good or bad, nobody knows at first. On the dusty outskirts of Willow Creek, the ranch dogs weren't barking, the chickens weren't scratching in the yard, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath as a thin layer of frost clung stubbornly to the grass. Rancher Cole Bennett stood beside his old barn, brushing down Jasper, the horse that had carried him through more storms than he cared to count. The sky above him was a muted blend of pale gold and fading blue, as if dawn itself was hesitant to begin. He didn't hear the children approach at first. It was the faint scuff of a boot against the porch steps that made him turn. And when he did, he saw a sight that made him pause, not because he was surprised, but because he understood that the day was about to ask something of him. 12-year-old Lila Harper stood on the porch with her little brother Milo pressed into her side. She was small for her age, thin from too many skipped meals, but there was a hardness in her eyes, something forged from carrying burdens far too heavy for a child. Milo, barely 7, clung to her hand tightly, his round eyes wide as if the world was always 2 seconds away from falling apart. Together they looked like a pair of sparrows caught in a winter wind, trying desperately to stay upright. Cole's rough, weathered face softened as he set down the brush. "Morning, Lila," he called, though his voice was gentler than usual. "You're up early. Everything all right?" Lila didn't answer. Instead, she stepped off the last porch stair and walked straight toward him, her chin trembling with a determination too strong to break but too fragile to hide. She stopped only a foot away from Cole's boots, Milo half hidden behind her. "Mr. Bennett," her voice came out small, strained. "Can you take us to town?" The words seemed to hang suspended in the cold air. A simple question on the surface, but Cole knew better. Children, especially ones like Lila, didn't make requests unless necessity had driven them to a place past fear. He lowered himself to one knee, leveling his gaze with hers. "Town. What's the matter, sweetheart?" he asked, his tone soft but firm. "You two never come a skin unless something's wrong." Lila swallowed hard, her breath hitching. "It's Mama," she whispered. "She's sick." She paused long enough for her eyes to glisten with the threat of tears. "Bad sick?" Cole's jaw tightened. Grace Harper was the type of woman who would smile through a hurricane and insist she was fine while her roof blew off. Pride was stitched into her bones, and stubbornness lived in every Harper that had set foot on that ranch. But sickness didn't care about pride. It didn't care about how many storms she'd survived. And by the look on Lila's face, this wasn't just a winter cold or a passing fever. "How long's she been like this?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Lila stole a glance at her brother. Milo shifted, burying his face deeper behind her sleeve as if the truth itself scared him. 3 days, she answered quietly. "She says it's nothing and that she just needs rest. But she couldn't get out of bed this morning. She couldn't breathe right. I tried to help her sit up, but she got dizzy and fell back." Cole's heart sank. Grace Harper had been a force once, wild and bright as a summer storm. Seeing her like that, even in description, hit deeper than he expected. "Why didn't she call for help?" he asked. "Because she didn't want you to worry." Lila's voice broke. "She says you already help us too much." Cole exhaled sharply. He had helped, yes, but he never considered it too much. Not for Grace. Not for her children. If anything, he'd always felt like he hadn't done enough. Not after her husband died in that river accident years ago. Not after she lost half her cattle during the drought. Not after she started walking with a limp that winter the fever took her strength. He'd seen her struggling, seen the weight of raising 2 kids alone pressing down on her shoulders. He told himself she'd come ask when things got too hard, but she never did. Pride, he thought bitterly. Pride and fear. And now her children were the ones standing here, asking for what she wouldn't. "What do you need in town?" he asked gently. "Medicine," Lila said. And maybe the doctor. I don't know. She wiped her nose with her sleeve. I just know she's getting worse. And I can't just sit there and wait. Milo tugged at Lila's coat, whispering, I don't want Mama to die. The way he said it, small, pleading, terrified, made something inside Cole crack. He rose slowly to his feet, taking in the two children shivering in the cold. Then he nodded. We'll go, he said. But on one condition. Lila stiffened. What is it? That you promise to come back home. She blinked, confused. Home. Your mama needs you, Cole said. And she'd worry herself sick if she woke up and found you gone. So if I take you to town, you have to promise me we're coming back. Together. No running off. No staying away because you think you'll be a burden. Family is family, you hear? Lila hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward Milo, toward home, toward the thought of a mother lying helpless in bed. Finally, she nodded. I promise, she whispered. It was soft, but it was enough. Good, Cole said, straightening his hat. Go wrap up warm. I'll get the wagon. As the children ran inside, Cole turned toward the barn with purposeful steps. But as soon as their small figures were out of sight, he let himself feel the fear he'd been holding back. For Grace. For the kids. For whatever awaited them on the road ahead. He hitched Jasper quickly, his hands moving out of long habit while his mind raced. If Grace was as bad as Lila described, they'd need more than simple fever medicine. They'd need the doctor. Maybe even a place in town for the night if things got worse. The thought made him clench his jaw. He wouldn't, let the Harper family fracture. Not like so many others around here had. When the wagon was ready, the children returned bundled in coats that were too thin for the cold. Cole lifted Milo into the back and handed Lila a wool blanket before climbing onto the seat. Hold on tight, he said as he snapped the reins. Jasper surged forward, eager to run despite the cold. The wheels groaned over the frozen dirt, each turn taking them farther from the ranch and closer to town. The ride was slow, the road uneven, and the air bit at their faces like sharp needles. Lila held Milo close, rubbing his hands between hers so he wouldn't grow numb. Halfway down the long road, clouds began gathering, dark, heavy, and moving quicker than prairie storms normally did. We might get wet, Cole muttered under his breath. But Lila heard him. Is the storm bad? She asked, voice tight. He forced a smile. We'll beat it. He wasn't sure they would. They rode through the quiet fields, past the old Miller property and the broken windmill that had stood crooked since the last spring flood. The smell of rain started drifting through the wind, and the air felt heavier, charged with the kind of pressure that warns even the untrained that a storm is waiting its turn. Mr. Bennett? Lila said suddenly. Yeah. Do you think the doctor will come with us if Mama can't get out of bed? I'll make sure of it, Cole replied instantly. And the pharmacy? She continued. Will they let us get the medicine without paying? I don't got enough saved. Mama says we need that money for food. Cole looked at her, at that small girl trying so hard to hold the world together with those thin little hands. Let me worry about that, he said softly. Your job is taking care of your mama. That's enough. Her lips trembled at that, relief mixing with guilt, then gratitude. The first raindrop splattered against the wagon roof as town finally came into view, its single street lined with the diner, the feed store, the sheriff's office, and the small clinic with its white-painted windows. But just as Cole steered the wagon toward the clinic, the sky opened with a sudden roar. Fat drops of cold rain slammed against them, and thunder cracked far too close for comfort. Hang on! Cole shouted as the wind whipped across the plains. They arrived at the clinic soaked, shivering, and breathless. Dr. Lydia Rowan met them at the door, her coat already on as if she'd sensed something was coming. She took one look at the children and then at Cole. What happened? She demanded. It's Grace, Cole said. She's real sick. Dr. Rowan grabbed her medical bag. How long? 3 days, Lila answered, her lips blue from the cold. The doctor's expression grew grave. Pneumonia? Maybe worse, Cole said. Without hesitation, Dr. Rowan nodded. I'm coming. But as they stepped back outside, the storm hit with full force. The wind howled, rain turned sideways, and the world blurred into watery gray. Jasper whinnied nervously. The wagon shook under the weight of the storm. But they had no choice. Grace Harper was dying, or close to it, and every minute counted. They set off through the storm, the wagon fighting against the wind. The children clung to each other, and Cole kept shouting to Jasper to keep steady. Thunder boomed overhead like a warning. Then, without any time to react, a fallen tree branch crashed across the road, slamming into the right wagon wheel. The wagon lurched violently left. Milo screamed. Lila grabbed him as the wagon tipped dangerously, but Cole pulled the reins with all his strength, forcing Jasper to shift his weight. For a moment, they wavered on 2 wheels. Then, thump. The wagon slammed back down. But the wheel was cracked. Useless. We walk from here. Cole shouted. The rain was blinding. The wind was cruel. But they pushed forward, stumbling across the muddy ground as they carried the medical supplies in their arms. Cole lifted Milo and wrapped his coat around him. Lila stayed so close to Dr. Rowan that their coats brushed with every step. They reached the Harper ranch soaked to the bone, freezing, and exhausted. Lila burst through the door. Mama, she cried. Inside, Grace Harper lay pale and trembling, her breathing shallow, her skin burning with fever. When she saw her children, she attempted a smile, but her strength faltered. Lila, she whispered. You shouldn't have. We brought help, Lila said through tears. Dr. Rowan rushed forward, and within seconds she was examining Grace, issuing firm instructions. Boil water. Get blankets. Cole, help me move her upright. Lila, keep talking to her. Don't let her drift. For hours the storm raged outside while they worked inside, fighting for a woman who had tried too long to fight alone. Lila never left her mother's side, stroking her hand, whispering stories, praying under her breath. Slowly, very slowly, Grace's breathing steadied. Color returned faintly to her cheeks. Her eyelids fluttered, and her voice, thin but alive, escaped. You came back, she murmured to Lila. I promised, Lila whispered. Grace looked at Cole next. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. He shook his head. You don't thank people for caring, he said quietly. That's what we're meant to do. When morning came, the storm had passed. The sky was bright. The prairie glistened. Grace Harper was still weak, but alive. And her children, exhausted, relieved, curled beside her on the bed, their small hands gently holding hers. Cole stood in the doorway watching them, feeling something warm settle in his chest. A reminder of what kindness could do. How it could pull people back from the edge. How it could turn fear into hope. Because kindness wasn't grand. It wasn't loud. It wasn't something that demanded attention. It was simple. A wagon ride. A promise. A hand reaching out in the storm. A willingness to show up. And that, sometimes, was enough to save a life. Morning came slowly, as though the sun itself was reluctant to rise after the storm. Its light trickled through the curtains in thin, trembling strips, illuminating the small bedroom where Grace Harper lay surrounded by the quiet hum of breath, blankets, and exhausted relief. Lila and Milo were curled on either side of her, their arms draped across her like anchors, as if holding on tightly might keep her from slipping away again. Grace stirred weakly, her eyes fluttering open to find the soft silhouettes of her children. And for the first time in many days, her chest filled with something stronger than pain, hope. Rancher Cole Bennett stood in the doorway, watching silently. His hat rested against his chest, his hair still damp from where the storm had soaked through his coat the night before. He hadn't slept. He had stayed near, listening for the doctor's instructions, fetching warm water, holding Grace steady when her breathing faltered. Not because he had to. Because he couldn't imagine doing anything else. Grace's eyes met his, and she managed a faint smile. She looked frail, the illness still lingering in the shadows beneath her eyes, but there was a spark of life returning, thin, but unmistakably there. "You stayed," she murmured, her voice barely more than a breath. Cole took a slow step inside. "Of course I stayed." Grace's gaze softened. "I didn't want you bothered." "Grace," he said gently, "you're not a bother. You never were." Before she could reply, Lila stirred beside her, blinking sleep from her tired eyes. When she saw her mother awake, her face lit with a mixture of joy and relief so intense she nearly burst into tears all over again. She sat up quickly and took Grace's hand. "You scared us, Mama," she whispered. Grace lifted her daughter's hand to her lips, kissing it weakly. "I know, baby. I know." Milo sat up next, rubbing his eyes. When he realized his mother was awake and breathing without gasping for air, he launched himself into her arms with a soft cry. Grace held him as tightly as her strength allowed, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Cole turned away slightly, giving them privacy. He wasn't ashamed of the emotion tightening his chest, but the moment belonged to them. After the doctor arrived, checked Grace, and left instructions, the quiet of the morning deepened. The storm had passed, leaving the land washed clean, the sky a pale blue canvas stretching endlessly overhead. Cole stepped outside while the children ate, letting the crisp air fill his lungs. The prairie was always beautiful after a storm, reborn in a way that reminded him that everything in life, even suffering, had a rhythm. Behind him, the screen door creaked. Lila appeared beside him, pulling her coat tight around her. "Mr. Bennett," she said softly. Cole glanced down at her. "Morning, sweetheart." She stepped beside him, staring out at the fields where droplets still clung to the tall grass. "Mama's better," she said. "The doctor said she just needs rest. And medicine. And that it'll take time." "It will," Cole agreed. "But she's stronger than most folks. She'll get there." Lila looked up at him then, eyes that seemed too old for her 12 years, eyes that had seen too much fear and too much responsibility. "You saved her," she said simply. Cole shook his head. "No. You did. You came to get me. You pushed through the storm. You sat with her all night. Don't forget that." "But you didn't have to help," she whispered. He rested a large, steady hand on her shoulder. "That's where you're wrong. When people need help, you show up. That's the kind of person I aim to be." Lila took this in slowly. She seemed to store his words somewhere deep inside her, in that quiet place where promises and truths were kept safe. After a long silence, she asked, "Did you mean it? What you said yesterday?" "Which part?" "That we had to come back home." Cole looked at her carefully. "I meant it with all my heart." "But why?" "Because," he said softly, "running away from fear doesn't fix it. Facing it with the people who love you does. You needed your mama, and she needed you. And I wasn't about to be the reason a family broke apart." Lila's throat tightened. "I almost didn't come back," she admitted. "I thought maybe Mama would be better off without worrying about me and Milo. I thought maybe we were too much." Cole knelt so he could look her in the eye. "Lila Harper, listen to me. You and Milo are the reason she fights every day. You are her strength. Not her burden." Her lip quivered, and for the first time since the storm, she allowed herself to cry. Cole held her until the tears began to ease. When she finally stepped back, she asked, "Do you think Mama will really get better?" Cole nodded. "With rest, medicine, and you two by her side?" "Yes." Lila breathed out a long, shaky breath, as if releasing days' worth of fear all at once. The days passed slowly, each one brighter than the last. Grace regained her strength in small steps. She sat up. She ate. She joked with the children. She scolded them gently for hovering too much. Dr. Rowan visited daily. Cole brought food, firewood, and the rest of the medicine the pharmacy insisted he didn't need to pay for until later, which meant no one had to know he paid out of his own pocket. The children laughed again. Milo ran through the fields. Lila hummed in the kitchen while helping prepare dinner. It was as though the whole ranch breathed easier. But the real turning point, the moment everything truly changed, came one afternoon as the sun dipped low across the horizon, painting the prairie in soft gold. Cole had come by with fresh milk and eggs. Grace was sitting on the porch wrapped in a quilt, her hair loose around her shoulders, her color returning. When she saw him climb the steps, she smiled warmly. "I owe you more than I can ever repay," she said. Cole shook his head immediately. "I didn't do it for repayment." "I know," she said gently. "That's why I'm saying it." He looked out at the fields, unable to meet her eyes. "You'd have done the same if the situation was reversed." "Maybe," she whispered. "But you didn't hesitate. You didn't question. You just showed up." "And her voice broke a little. "I haven't had many people show up in my life lately." Cole turned to her then, really looking at her, the quiet strength in her, the vulnerability beneath her resilience. He'd always admired her, always respected how hard she fought to raise her children and keep the ranch alive. But now, seeing her sit there, alive because the world had decided to show kindness for once, it stirred something deep in him. "You're not alone, Grace," he said softly. "You haven't been for a long time. You just didn't know it." She studied him for a long moment. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why do you care so much?" Cole hesitated, but not because he didn't know the answer. He hesitated because sometimes the truth felt heavier when spoken out loud. "When my wife passed," he said slowly, "I lost myself. Folks were kind at first, then they moved on, as people do. But one neighbor, old Mrs. Barton, she showed up every single day for a month. Brought food, cleaned the kitchen, sat with me even when I said I wanted to be alone. I once asked her why she kept coming." Grace listened closely, her hands folded in her lap. She said, "Because someone once sat with me when I needed it. And kindness has a way of circling back." He paused. "I swore that day I'd be that person for someone else someday. And, well, you showed up in my life needing help. I think that's how the circle works." Grace's eyes glistened. "So we were the circle coming back to you?" "Maybe," he said with a small smile. "Or maybe I was the circle coming back to you." She laughed softly, a fragile sound, but genuine. Inside, Lila stood in the doorway listening. Her eyes widened slightly, as if she were witnessing something profound without fully understanding it. She didn't interrupt. She simply watched, absorbing the lesson unfolding in front of her. The lesson that kindness wasn't a transaction. It wasn't a debt. It was a promise, one that extended beyond storms, beyond sickness, beyond fear. That evening, after Cole left, Lila joined her mother on the porch. "Mama?" she asked, snuggling beside her. "Yes, baby." "Mr. Bennett said kindness circles back. Do you think that's true?" Grace rested her cheek on Lila's hair. "More true than anything I've ever known." Lila thought about that for a moment. Then, will we ever get a chance to circle it back? To help someone like he helped us? Grace squeezed her hand. "Oh, Lila. You already have. You saved me." You promised to come back home, and you kept your word. That's kindness too. That's love. Lila's heart warmed. But there was still something she needed to hear. And we're not a burden. Grace turned her daughter's face gently toward her. You and Milo are my whole world. You are never, never, a burden. The sun dipped lower, and the sky shifted from gold to soft lavender. A quiet settled over them, the kind that feels like peace and healing and new beginnings. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Grace whispered a silent prayer, not of desperation, but of gratitude. For survival. For her children. For the ranch. For the man who had carried them through the storm. And for the promise that started it all. The promise that coming home, returning to love, hope, and family, is always the bravest choice. Days turned into weeks. Strength returned. Life resumed. And though the storm eventually became just another memory, the impact of that night lived on in every sunrise, every shared meal, every laugh that echoed across the ranch. Kindness had saved them. And kindness would continue to guide them. Because promises, especially the ones made in moments of fear, have a way of changing everything. Sometimes they even save a life.